Welcome to Black No Sugar.
Yay!
Have you been watching it?
Yes, I have. I like that there are no men.
Well, the men...
They're in the background. Yeah, they should stay there. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, this is Black No Sugar. We had an episode in our first season on reading. We had a bit of a debate on the importance of reading with Yvonne, one of the hosts, saying, is it really that important? I mean, if it's for getting knowledge or learning, there's so many other avenues where that could happen. I could watch TV, I could listen to the radio, I could speak to people. Those are all ways of getting knowledge. For a lot of people, especially in Africa, or maybe in the Ugandan context where I've been raised, reading is something that comes to you first in a classroom, and as a child, you have to read to pass your exams, you have to read so you can, get an education. It's something that you do because you have to, not because you enjoy it. And I guess when people start to have to make a choice, I say, you know what, I've gone through this for a long time, I don't want to do it anymore. So I know you guys read. I mean, by virtue of the fact that we are here, I know you read. I've read some of your writings, which are really, really nice. Yeah. Yeah, so how did reading first come to you? Is it the same way as with most people in a classroom, or were you introduced to it in a different kind of way?
Well, personally, I've always hated assigned readings, like class reading. I'm not big on that. But when I was in primary school, I hated school. I don't like school. My sister was in high school at the time, and she was studying literature. So she used to send me the books that she was reading. She would send me books every week, and I'd have to write a letter with a summary of the book and stuff. And I guess she thought she was making me read, but it was really a great escape from school. And I just picked it up from there. Yeah, I've never lost it. Yeah.
Okay, what was your experience?
Okay, so I've always been around books. My dad reads a lot, and one of the things my mom tells us is that we should study and all of that. So when I was younger, they would buy different kinds of storybooks for my siblings and I to read. And I think it was also helpful because I have older siblings who read a lot. And so, consciously, I remember starting to read when I was, I think, 10 or 11. Living around books, you're curious about what's happening, what's going on in this book. So I picked up a novel called The Street Lawyer by John Grisham, and I read it. I think I was 10 or 11. I remember I was in my first year in secondary school, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. And that was just it for me. I started reading and buying, and I would save and read, go to the library, and all sorts of things. Of course, I had been reading before then, more children classics and all of that, but I feel like that was like the awakening point for me, with regards to reading. And it wasn't just it was escapist too, but it was also like a form of knowledge, to know what it's, how they say that when you read, you experience other places, what other people go through. So it was also a form of knowledge in that I was beginning to know what happens in other places, what happens when you're a lawyer, and all sorts of things like that.
Okay, so when you say it was a form of knowledge, yeah, like for a lot of us who like to read, I know people call us bougie and things like that. And why do you think it's important that, when we tell people to read? We have had so many conversations on, the reading culture in Africa is dying, people don't want to read anymore. I mean, you can post a picture on social media with a poster and people say, when is it happening? When it's, right there in front of you, but simply because they didn't read it. Why do you feel like it's important? I know we can, we enjoy it, we enjoy reading, and but why do we keep re-emphasizing the importance of reading? What is that importance, you think?
Like I said, it was a way of learning new things, but not just that. There is this whole emotional aspect that reading captures. So I think from reading you learn empathy. You learn about what other people are going through. That's one of the best ways to know what's happening around you. I mean, you could read okay, not reading, but you could watch TV and you could know that this is what is happening. But I think that there is something that words do that other forms of interaction, other forms of knowledge can't quite capture.
I think that words are timeless because there were books in 1962 that are still here, right, that we read. And also there's, for example, the music that we listened to back then. I wasn't there. But you hear people talk about it, but it's like one song, two songs. We don't know all the music that was there. But we can find all the books that were there. There's catalogs in libraries of material from way back. I think it's the easiest way of archiving knowledge, and it's trusted. For example, the books that are here now, we are sure that they will be here how many years later, yeah? If they're not self-published. If they're from a reputable publisher, the publisher, even if the people who are there now die and move on, the books will they'll still be there. There'll still be these libraries that archive them as well. I think reading opens you up to that vast knowledge, yeah?
That in
other ways they don't. Because I think there was TV then, right? Do we know what was there? No. Yeah. Even if there's some recordings, they're just a few of what they thought was important, yeah? So in a way there's some history that is erased because they don't think it's that important to archive it. Yeah.
So the other question that I have, I guess also in line with that response, is if I've read Odokonyero, for example, now in 2018, and I mean, I read the book, and most of the stories in there, I guess, are around people's experiences and things like that, that would want people in years to come to read and understand and empathize with. But is that something that's emphasized when we encourage people to read? That, you know, this is important information that you need to have, so you must read it.
I think that the people must want the information, because people will tell you to read, but if you don't want the knowledge, there's no point. Yeah. And I think that people must understand why they need the knowledge sometimes, because there are all these things that are happening that are not new, you know. And there's all these things that have been written about them. There's all these ways to understand them, different views that people have had. And, you know, we're having the same conversations over and over again because we don't want to go back and learn our history, read about it. Yeah. So I think that if people know why they need the knowledge, then we don't have to keep going back in circles, you know, having the same conversations.
Why do people need that knowledge?
Because there are things that are happening that you can only understand, and things that you can approach with knowledge.
And knowledge is power.
Yeah.
I mean, with knowledge you can do so many things. So I feel like if you do not read, then I feel like you're just limiting yourself, because there's so many things. You know, there's this interesting saying that if you want to something about hiding the secrets. If you want to hide something, put it in a book. I mean, it's a stereotype that is used to say that Africans don't read, but I feel like it's something that it's not about Africans, but generally it's true about people who do not read. Yeah.
Where is that stereotype coming from, that Africans don't read?
First of all, I don't agree that Africans don't read.
Exactly what
I don't agree with that at all. I think it's a tired trope.
I think it's from the West. I don't know.
I think so too. Because in school we had all these books that would go around so many times. Yeah. These romance novels, John Grisham, like a book would go around the whole class. Yeah. And then there's all these people reading all these self-help books and stuff. I don't think Africans don't read. I think they read. I don't think Aristotle would be in business if Africans didn't read. What reading very many different things does is widen your understanding of things. For example, if you have read some literature with queer characters, I feel like that widens your understanding of them. And even if you still choose to be homophobic, you have a wider understanding of their lived experiences. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean that when you read you're going to be a changed human being, but it just widens your understanding of people's experiences.
There's a certain class or sector of people that don't have access to Aristoc,
That's true.
which is maybe a bigger population who don't have even access to a school, who is just trying to survive, like get through life. Why would reading be so important to that person, but also how do you take it to them? Of what value is it to them?
It's a very tricky question because based on everything we've been saying about dispelling the narrative that Africans don't read, and I've been thinking about how publishing is expensive.
She works in a publishing house.
Yes, I do work in a publishing house, and I can understand why people who do not buy books don't buy them, because publishing is expensive and the end result is expensive, like the book itself is expensive. So I can understand why people would prefer to read the pirated copy of a book. But I'm not sure I can quite answer your question as to how we can convince people that it is important to read. If you're not content with what life has to offer or your experiences, I feel that you should want change of a certain degree, even if it's small, even if it's you want to just quickly make small money and live the kind of life you're living. So I feel that if I come to you and I tell you that, oh, this book is important for you to read, I feel like you should want to try it out, because, okay, what if there's some truth in what I'm saying? I don't feel like you can really convince someone who doesn't realize that if you want change, or if you're, I don't want to use the word poor, but you understand what I'm saying, If you're in that kind of situation, you should be open to suggestions on how to make your circumstances different.
I think that those people you were talking about, the people who the only thing they're thinking about is survival, I feel like they have their own ways of getting that knowledge, which is why you talked about in the beginning that there are very many ways of getting knowledge, and they have their own ways of organizing, of learning, and it's not necessarily that they need a book. For those of us who have access, I think that it is important that we use the access that we have, to get the books. And also there are these books they sell on the street, and they're really cheap and secondhand, but still books. So I think that those people who are only thinking about survival and can't afford the books, even the books on the streets, they have their own ways of getting knowledge, that are not necessarily from books, and that's what works for them.
And it's also very interesting because when people say that Africans don't read, I find it very incredulous, because even people that think of survival, or people in this situation or circumstance that you have mentioned, are also, they find their ways to read. So that's why
produce knowledge.
So some buy secondhand books, some buy some read illegal ebooks. They're online. I just feel like that narrative that so
I think maybe just to add, when you were saying us who have access to this, it's something that was going on in my head. I'm like, if I have access to a book and certain information, are there creative ways we can reproduce that information for them or package it for them? Lately, the world trend is that people are now consuming information and data and all that in the audio-visual format. What effects does that have on the reading culture, and how can it help it? How can they work together? How can they help the reading culture?
First of all, I think that yes, audio versions of books have become popular, but I don't think that they have yet gotten up to 20% of the attention that an average book would receive. But I can see a future where we might get there, because having these audiobooks has given access to people who are more audio oriented to read or to access information. But I do not think it will change anything about book production, because ebooks have been around for a while, but we are still printing books. Yeah, so I just think that it would supplement it. So more people who find that this is a better way of acquiring knowledge would subscribe to the audio version. And not even just, I don't think it's just the audio version. So now online there are like video essays. Yeah, so it's just an essay but in the video version, because people realize that we are more inclined to be attracted to things that are visual, that have aesthetics. So so they have just used that and found a way to still make it an easy way to access information, to access knowledge.
It's interesting that you talk about something being attractive for people to come to it, because we're talking about how the African literary scene mostly has women writers. Tsitsi Dangaremba once said that the people that these publishing houses pick up are usually people who are photogenic, because they're the people who can sell the books. But that's a conversation for another day. I feel like the visual and the audio is usually fed by the written. Yeah, I feel like the audio and the visual cannot exist without the written.
Yeah.
Because even TV scripts have to be written.
Yeah.
Podcasts are usually from things that are happening, that have been written about. So there are all these forms of information, of getting knowledge, audio, visual, whatever way. But I feel like those are just excerpts, and you need to go back to the source, to get the full thing. Just like if you just get quotes of social media, you don't really know where it's coming from. Yeah? You need to get the whole thing.
I still think the books are better than the movies. Like, how the movies are based on books.
Well, it's interesting because I read, what book did I read? I watched the movie first, and I had to go and look for there's some books that I watch the movie first, I have to go and look for the book. There's some that I read the book first, and I want to go and look for the movie. But books are a lot better.
Yeah.